Hi folks, we're going to take a look at 7b and 8c from page 216. So in 7b, they're asking us to find the primary trig ratios for this angle, and in 8c, they want all 6 trigonometric ratios for the angle. All right, so the way I'm going to do this is the way I do all of them right now, is I draw myself a little picture so that I get the side lengths of the triangle, or the x, y, and r values, that I can then read my answers straight off the diagram. Okay, so first thing is to locate the angle 5 pi over 6. So again, what I tend to use is the 4 main angles here, 0, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and then from there figure out where I'm going. So I know that pi, I'm going to think of that as 6 pi over 6. So 5 pi over 6 is just 1 pi over 6 less than 6 pi over 6. So what I have here is my angle, pi over 6, which is the related acute angle, and then here's my 5 pi over 6. But by noticing that my related acute angle is pi over 6, I can now get the details I need to find the trig ratios. So this is going to be 1, 2, negative root 3, because x is negative. And so from here, I can now just read off all my trig ratios. So sine of 5 pi over 6 is just going to be 1 over 2. Of course, positive since it's in the second quadrant. Then cosine of 5 pi over 6 is just going to be x over r, so negative root 3 over 2, negative as expected. And then finally, tangent of 5 pi over 6 is just going to be y over x, so negative 1 over root 3, as expected, negative in the second quadrant. Okay, and now I'm going to do the exact same thing with 5 pi over 4. Okay, so let me start with my diagram. So again, notice I'm always working with a common denominator. So here, because my denominator is 4, I'm going to think of this as being 4 pi over 4 plus another pi over 4 gives me 5 pi over 4. And so there's my related acute angle. The full angle is 5 pi over 4. And then, of course, this is just going to be the triangle, negative 1, and root 2. Okay, so notice how I indicate these negative values because the x and y values are both negative. And as before, I'm just going to read off my answers. So sine of 5 pi over 4 is negative 1 over root 2. Cos of 5 pi over 4 is again negative 1 over root 2. And then tan of 5 pi over 4 is negative 1 over negative 1, which is just 1. And now for my reciprocal ratios, I don't even need to look at my diagram anymore, because now I just know it's going to be the reciprocals of these numbers. So here we have cosecant of 5 pi over 4 is just going to be negative root 2. Same thing with secant of 5 pi over 4. It's going to again be just negative root 2. And then the cotangent of 5 pi over 4 is just going to be equal to, well, 1 over 1 is just 1. All right, so just to recap here, step number 1 is to identify where the angle is and figure out what related acute angle is associated to it. And then once I get my information on my diagram, I can just read any trig ratio I need right off the diagram. Okay, that's it for this one.